Hey everybody, it's me, JJ Panzer, your smart apartment advisor here, back with another weekly phone call with our clients and friends. As I've been discussing already up to now, things are just difficult and challenging, and life is, it's difficult as a property manager, but this is the first time in 10 or 11 years we've really had it bad, and so in the grand scheme of things, this is not that awful, except for the cost of life and illness that this is all costing everybody right now, and the lack of all the fun things we like to do. So right now it's difficult. The thing that's been John in my office has spent most of his time working with our residential tenants on requests for rent reductions and things. What's interesting is where in the past we've had success asking tenants to make a commitment to us for a year in exchange for a free month's rent or some sort of reduction. Tenants are not willing to make a commitment now because they feel like everything is too uncertain. And the fact of the matter is we don't have any leverage. We're not going to be able to go find another tenant, even at a lower price. It's kind of hard to, just reduce the rent and have it be an open-ended reduction that we don't know, we don't know how long someone's going to stay. The fact of the matter is if they leave, they are either going to have to go move in with somebody else or they're going to have to sign a one-year lease. So, the one-year commitment isn't really as much of an issue. I guess it shouldn't be as much of an issue if they're actually committed to staying, but nobody can commit to anything right now with good reason. So, it's difficult. I'm working with commercial tenants who are either dealing with absolutely cratered revenues and, trying to make ends meet to be able to pay their staff and insurance and other expenses, or businesses that are unable to be open, hair salons and nail salons and things like that, where there's no feasible way for them to do any of their business, and yet they are hopeful that they'll be able to reopen. And so, in the beginning of all this, a couple of months ago, the most generous deals that I was seeing commercial landlords making were, look, I'll give you half rent for the rest of the year. And I thought that was kind of a lot, but at the time, it felt like that was the best we were going to do. And now I've got, deals where we're forgiving, a couple of months back rent and giving rent for the rest of the year at half price, and doing whatever we can. And, if we can keep rent at half price for the rest of the year, and keep the rest of the lease status intact for a commercial tenant, we're fortunate. But, right now, I'm even delving into the realm of working on percentage leases where we can have some sort of a base and then compare revenue to what the rent would be as a percentage of the overall revenue, and come up with a percentage so that if we can do this for a couple of years, maybe there's a chance to recover and make back some of the money if business recovers a year or two from now. So, I'm going to keep working on those. I'll see if I can figure out a way in a, mostly small neighborhood commercial lease situation as opposed to a large shopping center situation, create a percentage lease for commercial tenants that will be fair and won't be a complete pain to administer or leave the door open for, underreported revenue and income, things like that. So we're doing everything we can. Rentals in the residential sector are difficult. They are, we still have a lot of activity and not a lot of movement. Once again, the only people really looking are people who are trying to upgrade. I actually have a very good friend who's lived in the same apartment, rent-controlled place for 14 years, and his rent is below market, but he really wants to have a few different amenities, wants to have some outdoor space. Everybody's big on outdoor space in your apartment these days, he's looking around and he's paralyzed by the thought that the market will continue to slide. This is what happens in deflationary cycles. That's why deflation is so difficult economically. He's paralyzed by the thought that if he makes a deal now, that maybe 3 months from now, the deal could be better. And he's going, well, you know, I'm not sure how much I want it, and I'm going to end up spending more money on this. Yeah, because you've got 14 years of rent control under your belt here. But at the same time, you know, that's what we're dealing with in the rental market. People who don't need to move, but who are, you know, generally committed to San Francisco, but paralyzed by the thought that they might be looking at a falling rent schedule and falling prices in the rental market for the long run, that they might miss out on a better deal in the future. So I'm getting a lot of people trying to negotiate. I'm doing my best to be aggressive and cordial and make sure that we stay on good terms with people and keep the people that we have in place. It's challenging. And so we are having, you know, our work cut out for us on this. It's quite difficult. With that, I think I want to introduce Denise Ledbetter to come back after a couple of weeks hiatus to tell us a little bit about the progress that we've made and where we're at with the lawsuit against the Preston legislation and any other legislative issues that are in front of us. Denise, welcome. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you, JJ.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being with us.
Sure. So the Preston legislation is going to be heard on July 31st. We do not expect success. We hope that it is a quick resolution confirming that the judge is not going to overturn the legislation, allowing us to immediately appeal. Okay. And that's the fastest we're going to go, because this is a request for an injunction. Interestingly, there is tenant counsel that also believes that it's a very dangerous situation because tenants will rely on it, and then at some point it will be overturned, and then they will be responsible for all the back rent due that they had been relying on would be forgiven, and then they will be evicted. And that's the main crux of the argument. If we were following that which New York imposed, which is deferment, but then you will have to be repaying the rent that was deferred. And if you're not going to pay it, you will be evicted. That's not what we have here with Preston. And so we're requesting that the court consider remodeling that attitude. Not that we're presenting that, but that's the attitude that is most helpful to tenants, frankly, because they're all just going to be evicted. So that's that situation. But I'm right there with you. The majority of my work right now has been commercial workouts. And that's exactly what's happening. Even people willing to amortize the deferred rent, they're not willing to pull the trigger and extend their lease. So we're in this catch-22. And now I'm seeing that they are requesting future government closure language in the leases that have to be identified, worked out, and then analyzed for the future, because that's a difficult situation too. If we have an executive order that stops us for 2 months, when do they pay that 2 months rent back? Right. So that's a whole other page of provisions that we're negotiating now.
So with those, I'm interested in that. With those clauses, there's a specific arrangement that says if the government closes down my business for, you know, a pandemic, the rent isn't due at that time, and then there's a specific arrangement for when it's due later?
Yeah.
So what is that arrangement?
7 consecutive days of government-ordered closure. Right. The tenant pays that month's rent, 50% of it, the following month. Okay. So that's 50% and 50%, but what about the month that they're paying, right? Right. So it's you're constantly catching up. Right. So they have to be, it has to be very carefully crafted. And that's just an example. What if it's not 50%? What if it's 25%? When do they pay the 75%? So they have to agree that they're going to extend their lease. Right. And that's the problem. Yeah. How can there's no way you're ever going to catch up. Right. From a pandemic. So you have to extend the lease for a period of time. Right. Sometimes, significant. And that is exactly what you're seeing in the residential market. You're giving people a year and they're like, oh, I don't know. So the commercial tenants are saying the same things. Right. I mean, they can't, and I think it's a significant possibility that when we come back from all this, so many businesses will have closed that the retail market will be
in the tank, we might be looking at retail rents that have fallen by half.
Yeah.
And all these leases that we've had are going to be very difficult to enforce as a result of that. People are going to look around and go, there's a space down the street for half as much. Why would I continue with the lease I've got here? And it's difficult to go with that. I mean, I've got a few situations where we have tenants who are on month-to-month leases, and a few situations with tenants that are, and most of my situations, tenants have multiple years left. And it seems to me like the farthest we can think in the future is 3 to 5 years. Anything beyond 5 years is just too far in the future for the landlord to wait for the money to come back and for the tenant to imagine continuing to pay. And anything, where you have a month-to-month tenancy or only a few months left, people are ready to scrap that and walk away. And we're already looking at renegotiating and writing whole new terms with a year from now that is very, very lenient and gives people a lot of room. But it's challenging. I agree.
And as you know, JJ, with the mom and pops, it's all about the operator. It's who is in the store.
Right.
So you can make these deals, and sometimes the tenants will say, yeah, I'll take a 3 to 5 year extension, and you're making a deal with this particular person, but then they have a 5-year deal that they can sell. So that's the other rub, is that, if they extend the lease, they have the right to assign the lease to a new operator, and that new operator may not be half the operator and may not be half the business person that the person that you've made the deal with was. So that's always the issue as well. This is not a corporate that they can bring in a great person in from Chicago. These are people that are doing this day to day.
Right. And most of these businesses are, they're food service, retail, personal services businesses, and they're strongly dependent on the personal skill of the person who's doing it. It's not something you can walk away from and leave your employees to do every single day.
That's right.
And so it really does, that underlines the value and the importance of being very, very understanding with good tenants who have had a good track record. And this is what I keep trying to explain to my landlords with commercial properties is, if you've got tenants who've been in their property for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years or more, and they've been successful and they haven't given you any trouble and they've been able to pay the rent,
keep them.
Let's do whatever we can. If they can't pay the rent right now, it's not their fault. Let's just be very, very forgiving and hope that they'll stay, because it's the easiest way to recover in the long run. Let's figure that if they were going to leave in 3 years, you might be, and seriously, they actually left, you might be looking 6 months to a year to find a replacement tenant, possibly. So let's just take that vacancy time now, while we know we can still keep them on the hook, and make sure that we recover together, because we've done well together for a long time.
That's right.
And I think that's, in a lot of ways, I think that's a similar situation with the residential tenants too. That's the essence of this business is the relationship and the trustworthiness. And when I've got people who are reliable and they've done a good job and they've made their payments and taken care of the property, that's somebody I want to keep. So one of the things that I've been thinking about is, there have been many different perspectives on this, and the concept. One weakness of our business is that the only remedy for non-payment is to kick somebody out. In an ideal world, or in this world where we actually have an opportunity to do this, can you think of a way where landlords could have some way of recovering something out of this without having to recover possession? Because recovering possession right now is technically impossible because the courts are closed, and also economically not attractive because the opportunity to find another tenant just doesn't exist. And one perspective that I read, there was an interesting article, talked about how the concept of evicting people from a property in the middle of an economic crisis like this or a pandemic doesn't make sense. Talked about homes in South Florida, in one of the counties of Florida where they had the highest level of foreclosures in 2008, 2009. They had a lot of swimming pools that were left unmaintained for a long period of time. And they had the first outbreak of malaria or something that they'd had in a first world
Broward
country
County.
in 70 years,
Mhm.
because people could have been allowed to stay in the properties and then keep them up at least. Can you think of this is just an off the wall question, but like some way to, if we could fix something in the superior court system to make collecting debts easier. Debt collectors typically are looking at, a lot of times they're collecting 50 cents on the dollar. Maybe there's a way to fix the court system to, kind of punish the landlords who are being too aggressive by saying, look, we're going to give you 50 cents on the dollar, and it's actually collectible. I don't know. It's just a thought. I'm trying to think of ways to solve problems without evictions.
Well, the issue is most people this is a very unusual situation. We're in a pandemic, so we don't want possession because we're not going to be able to replace anybody.
Right.
So if you're talking about just getting rent, then you make a deal with your tenant.
Right.
And the deal is that if they haven't paid, you can still sue for breach of contract.
Right.
The problem is that if they're a month-to-month tenant, they'll give you a 30-day notice and they'll vacate. They won't face that judgment.
Right.
But if you have a term tenant, you file a lawsuit for breach of contract because they have a term through next May, for example, another 10 months, and then you make a deal with them, and you don't take the $60,000 that they owe. You reduce it to $30,000 pursuant to a stipulation, and they agree that a judgment would be issued against them should they not pay.
Right.
So that's that issue, but that's not possession, and that's not a great thing for the tenant, but at least the tenant knows that they're not going to have to pay until some future date because you have a judgment against them. Right. And that judgment is automatically good for 10 years. So it's not possession, it's money. So what do you want, owner, money or possession?
Right. Nicholas, do you have a question? Go ahead and unmute yourself there, Nicholas.
Now, I don't understand the court, why it would not accept this lawsuit or whatever. Can you give us a little more detail on why they're not going to consider it like stealing people's property or whatever? Why is it you're expecting some quick decision and an appeal?
Because in San Francisco County, the vast majority of the population is tenants. The tenants vote for the judges. So it's politics. We never get any love. Well, I shouldn't say that. We don't get a lot of love in San Francisco County from our Superior Court judges. They're very politically attuned to who pays their salary. And the people who pay their salary are the tenants that are voting. They're very, very strong, active tenant vote. So we have to go to the Court of Appeals and we have to go higher. So that's why. We're hoping that it's a very quick decision we assume it's going to be Judge Haynes, and we can immediately appeal because that's where we're going to get some assistance.
I see. The thing that's funny for me is every time we vote, I don't know who any of the judges are.
Yeah, that is definitely an issue. A lot of them are pretty well identified. They flog their progressive bona fides in their campaign information and in their statements in the booklet. But I would recommend, Nicholas, if you have questions, that you refer to the San Francisco Apartment Association slate card, where hopefully the least bad of the choices is represented there, and you can mostly trust that what's in there is the best we could possibly hope for. And if there's nothing listed, maybe you leave your ballot blank too.
That's a great campaign slogan, by the way. Yeah. The least bad, the most you can hope for.
Yeah. The least bad is the best you're going to get. Anyway, that sounds like maybe it's Joe Biden's campaign slogan this way around. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and let the other guy do all the talking. He's going to sink his own boat. Yeah. Anyway, with that, I'm going to introduce Josh to tell us about what he's got for a deal today. How you doing, Josh?
Very good. How are you?
Good, good. I've got screen sharing all set up. You can set it up and run the presentation there, but I'm interested to hear more about this property. We've got an East Bay deal today to look at. There you go.
Excellent. All right. Good afternoon, everybody.
I like that.
today, everybody can hear me, right? Can you hear me?
Yes.
So today, as promised last week, I do have an East Bay deal. This is a Berkeley property on Claremont Avenue, right next to 2 blocks from the Claremont Hotel at Claremont and Ashby. This is 13 units, 1 non-conforming unit, 12 regular. Priced at $3 million. Here's a picture of it. So low deferred maintenance. You see I have a running theme here. My properties I tend to pick tend to be add value. And so this property is 1920s construction. I love it. I love this kind of design of a building with the entrance right in the middle there and kind of an L-shaped building. All hardwood floors. These units can be, I'll scroll down to show you a couple of points on the deal. Again, what I'm seeing here is 5.57 cap rate. So I'm not looking at anything that's below a 5 cap these days, just because I think in this market, you don't have to, these deals are popping up. They're still rare. Used to see a deal in the 5s like this, but they're, I seem to find 1 a week or so. There's a lot of people that are holding tough to last year's prices, and those properties are sitting. They're not selling. So people who need to sell, are offering discounts right now.
Josh, is there something about this property that you think would be motivating a seller to price it like this?
Yeah, so I'll get to,
okay.
I'm definitely gonna lead up to that. So this is in kind of the most Tony region of Berkeley. This is in Elmwood district. So this is like great for college students, for professionals, to be in a really kind of nice neighborhood. It's near Rockridge BART. It's about 3/4 of a mile to the BART station. So the area is great. And then I'll get into some kind of more it's been owned by the same owner since the 1990s. So it's an owner that hasn't put in a lot of money into the property. But it's selling at $230,000 per door, which is quite cheap for 13 units in especially in a prime area that this is. So here's the unit. You can kind of see that these beautiful floors and these nice windows. It's older. It looks like San Francisco properties. I mean, I'm sure everybody's seen a million of these. But when renovated and updated, they're really gorgeous. They're really gorgeous units. These big windows, kind of flooding and light. This is a little more original than I would prefer in terms of the bathroom and kitchen. But again, cosmetic remodel here. Excuse me. Cosmetic remodel here, and you got really beautiful units. This is the Claremont Hotel. I'm sure all of you know the famous Claremont Hotel. So what jumped out at me more than anything else, so the pricing on this is great. The location's great. The building's great. What I'm seeing here, one thing that building doesn't have laundry, but it does have space downstairs to add laundry. So I would do that. That's kind of a no-brainer for a 13-unit building. I'd probably try to add two sets of washer dryers. The biggest thing here, so this is a probate deal. This is an agent that does pretty much exclusively probate listings. And this agent is literally all over the Bay Area. And the big thing that jumped out at me here is this. I know this agent, and he does primarily single family and condos. So when I saw him listing a 13-unit building, that always catches my attention when you see a residential agent doing a very legitimate, real commercial building. And lo and behold, what that normally presents for a buyer is opportunity. And in the sense that, residential agents just kind of don't fully understand the market, and they don't understand how all the numbers work, and they don't kind of know how to price these things particularly well in terms of how all these numbers are moving around. So I, scroll down here. So I was looking at their valuation. There's just kind of errors popping up all over this. Down below, net cash flow it's not a 7.35% return on your cash. That's an error. There's a few expense errors that I can, I won't get into. The point is not to pick it apart, but that the numbers just aren't tight, and the understanding of the value of this property is not tight. So on a deal like this, when I see something like this, I would kind of move fast. There's also that probate listing aspect that you're not dealing with an owner that's necessarily super tied to exactly what, getting maximum value. They may be most interested in speed and a clean offer and no fuss. So the other big thing here is you'll see the gross rent at 264 and market rents at 356, 264,000 all the way up to 356,000. So it's a huge, really nice upside of 35% on your rents. So you're buying into a 5.57 cap with a real nice upside here. And again, so moving down here, the other thing that jumped out at me. So again, here's this person's putting down payment at 50%. Last time I checked, 50% of 3 million is not 1 million.
Right.
So there's just, and I'm not trying to pick on him.
Right.
It just presents value. It presents insight into this person doesn't know what they're doing, to be nice. The other thing
isn't well versed in this sort of real estate transaction.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's really different. Selling a house compared to selling a 13-unit building is just a very, very different process.
Right. It's an income producing property versus I love it property.
You're selling a business when you're selling this. So the rentable square feet at 12,672 puts you at an average of 974 square feet per unit.
Yeah.
That's huge. These are really large units. So you often see that in these 1920s units. You see these kind of large one bedrooms that you wouldn't build now. No way would you build a 974 square foot one bedroom now, but it was done then. So I love that. The price per square foot is quite low here at 236. They're probably not 974 square feet. It's probably closer to 850. There's probably a count of hallways in there and whatnot, but large units. His cap rate actually is roughly correct, but and then you go down here, you look at he's quoting a loan down here at the lower left, at the bottom, an interest rate at 4.75% on a $1.5 million loan. You could absolutely beat that right now. That's not a good number. So, presenting kind of all list, full list price offer on this relatively quickly is something that I would do here. You scroll down, here's the rent roll. So you have 9 one-bedroom units, 3 studios, and 1 non-conforming 2-bed, 1 bath. You have a couple lifer tenants here. You have one in unit 3 paying $830. You have another in that non-conforming unit paying $845. You get two units out of 13 in Berkeley that are like this. That's just standard. It's kind of like San Francisco in that sense. You always get that lifer tenant in there, and 2 out of 13 to me is tolerable. You have these vacant studio units. So, vacant units right now are obviously a concern anywhere. And so less so in the East Bay. He's pricing them at $1,300 for a studio. I would pretty much guarantee that once renovated, that is a very low number. It's probably closer to $1,900. it depends, layout, light, all those things, but I think he's undervaluing those. So I think there's some upside there. The market rent at 1-bedroom units over there at $2,700, that's probably renovated. That's a little aggressive, but also doable, especially if you put laundry in. So I actually like, I don't have too many problems with his market rents here. And at 22,000, generating 22,000 a month on a $3 million building is a go for me. This operation statement, you know, again, I'm not going to pick this apart, but there's a lot of problems here. The insurance, the current insurance he's listing at $16,805, and then at market closer to $10,000. How did the insurance drop by $7,000 when your rents go up by 35%? I don't know. Anyway, these are just kind of clerical errors probably, or just not fully understanding the numbers. But this is a nice opportunity here. Here's kind of just a summation of the numbers here. And yeah, so this is not as much a COVID related deal as opposed to a probate residential agent listing a 13-unit building and just kind of ready to offload it. You know, what often happens is it doesn't matter what you put out or the data that you put out. The sophisticated buyers will figure out the value of it. Or you're in a middle of a pandemic and there's not a lot of buyers out there, and you slide in a nice clean offer and you get a good deal. So this is, you know, this is something that, you know, just hit the market. I do like it. And if anybody has any questions, let me know.
Josh, do you feel like the tenant profile in that location in Berkeley is likely to be mostly students, or do you think there's a mix?
I think definitely a mix.
Okay.
It's kind of, it's not really, it's largely single family homes and very expensive ones. So it's not really, I wouldn't describe it as a young person's neighborhood. You know, the people want to be closer to Rockridge or, so I think professionals, I think you're going to have a nice mix of professionals and a few students for sure to fill that in. But you're not dependent on either group, right, per se.
Yeah, because that seems like it would be a little farther from campus, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
You know, you're not, can you imagine being 4 blocks from campus and having all of your student tenants say, I'm leaving, I don't have to be here. There's no reason for me to physically be at school. The school's not open.
Right.
And,
yeah.
and they all walk out the door and you can't fill those units again. So,
yeah.
You know, there is some demand going on at that part of town. So that's a good location.
Yeah, exactly. So nice little deal. I'm glad I found something in the East Bay that you know, the only thing that I would say would be a negative here is there's definitely gonna be some deferred maintenance. And so you're gonna spend some money on unit renovation. Every turn, you're probably looking at $45,000, $50,000 to turn that unit. But you know,
yeah,
if you can get 2,700 out of a 1-bedroom.
Yeah. And there's a boiler in that building, so it's going to have some higher overhead,
yeah,
higher utility costs. But you know, with the turns, you might be able to figure out a good way to start transitioning that over. You know, we're going toward an electric future in most California buildings at some point soon. So that might be.
Berkeley's already already gone there. All new construction is electric in Berkeley now.
Right.
By law. So yeah.
And so, you know, maybe there's a way to, you know, if you look at the investment in, I've been thinking about this a lot. You look at the investment in something like, you know, photovoltaic and heat, hot water, solar panels on a building like that, and then you figure slowly as each unit turns over, you just pull out the radiators and put in some electric heat that has, you know, solar backing it up.
Yeah.
It might be worthwhile. So
yeah. Absolutely. Yep.
Anyway, that sounds good. That's an interesting and very exciting opportunity, I think. And if anybody's interested in talking more about that, let us know. But that was a good one. Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome.
All right, let me just switch back over here. Very good. Well, it's good seeing you, everybody. Unless anybody has other questions. Oh, Nicholas has another question. I see she's got his hand raised here.
JJ, because of the reduction in residential and commercial rents, what are your thoughts about now applying with the city for reduced property taxes?
I think
Or
that's
assessment.
well. I mean, I think that's. I think it's that's a quixotic sort of a venture, because you probably in most circumstances have Prop 13. And if you've owned your property, I know you've owned your property for a long time, so your property taxes are probably relatively low. I think the better way forward, first of all, hopefully everybody who's dealing with situations and has vacant units that can't be filled and commercial tenants who aren't paying the rent is well capitalized and has enough equity in their building that this isn't going to be an issue. You know, it's got to be a minimum of 30% equity. If you've bought your building in the last 3 to 5 years, you may very well have a high property tax basis, and you could get get somewhere with a request for that, for a reduction in your basis. Really, in the bigger picture, I was having a conversation with one of my clients with 2 commercial stores and 8 units in the building, and we have both of the commercial stores unable to pay rent and 2 apartments that have gone vacant. And you know, the client mentioned to me, you know, we're getting close to the point where we're going to have some trouble making the mortgage payment. And I said, well, you need to go to the bank now, and you need to ask for a forbearance agreement on your loan now, because you're dealing with a pretty high vacancy level, and you know, the 2 commercial tenants represent 1/3 of the rent for the building, and that's a problem. And well, you know, he said, I think we're okay for now, and I'd rather wait until I get into a bind. Well, once you're in a bind, it's too late. You got to do it now, and you can't feel guilty about trying to get that, because as I'm sure some of you know, when you go to the bank, they basically have an off-the-shelf solution. Here's your answer. You got 6 months, no payments, and then gets paid back over 36 months or whatever it is. But it's easier than straining to make that mortgage payment right now if you are dealing with, you know, reduced collections during this difficult time. So, you know, I think that's the better response. You know, I know that we've discussed your situation a bit, and I do think that you know, you would have, especially in South of Market, you would have a definitely a legitimate reason to go to your bank and say, I need to, you know, look after my reserves here. And I think that's the way to do it, instead of trying to, I mean, the property tax reassessments take years to get. And especially if you've had your building for, you know, 20 years. I mean, how long have you owned your building? It's been a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know, even if they give you a 10% reduction, it might be $1,000 a year. I mean,
Okay, so it's not a big deal, and it's not based on what your current property taxes are in reducing the rent based on reduction of revenues.
no, you're not paying a percentage of your gross in property taxes. You pay
That's
a percentage of your assessed base value, and your base value is 20 years old. So
Okay.
you get your benefit out of your low property tax basis anyway.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Josh.
Has anybody applied for a PPP loan who has an LLC? And I'm just wondering if you've heard about anybody getting a PPP as an LLC, who owns, you know, myself and some partners own a mixed use property, and the primary tenant is paying $0. And some people are telling me, well, you're an LLC, and I'm like, well, I don't, you know, you can apply for PPP, and I'm like, well, I don't really have any employees. We're just running this asset as a group of investors. And some are saying to me that I should be able to get a PPP loan. Have you heard anything about that? Has anybody any experience with that?
I don't think you're going to get anywhere with that, because it's based on your payroll.
Yeah.
If you don't have any employees, you don't have any basis for requesting payroll, and you also don't have any rent that you're paying or utilities that you're paying to run your business, because it's an investment property. This is I know what building you're talking about. Yes, you could do it as an LLC. I mean, LLCs have, you know, they run payroll all the time, but in a circumstance like yours, there's no payroll and you're not paying any rent to a landlord. And then those are really, it's 75% of the loan has to be spent on payroll for 8 weeks.
So there's no program directly for someone in my situation then? I mean, as far as you know.
No, I mean, I think loan forbearance.
Yeah, the loan forbearance, it's a construction loan, and it's already being, you know, it's accumulating in an interest reserve, so there's no monthly payment on the construction loan.
Right.
It's tied to a project.
And you're still completing the project. I mean, your contractor hasn't stopped working, have they?
Right. Yeah. So we're still working. It's just I do have various expenses that I'm having trouble covering, and so based on this loss of rent.
Right.
But I'm just wondering what that program might be. There has to be something out there, or is it?
I don't think
Is
so.
it the old pound sand program?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that one. Yeah.
The sorry, there's nothing for you program. I mean, I think with the commercial tenant not paying rent, you're waiting for one of these, you know, one of these bills to come through, like the what is it, SB 1410 at the state level, but that has like tax vouchers that don't start till 2024 and get paid back over 10 years. So that's a terrible deal. It just takes too long. You're not going to be, you know, sitting around with that deal for that much longer.
I wonder if I could hound the tenant for them to get their PPP loan.
That's what you should be doing. They need to go get their PPP loan, and then they can pay you, you know, they can pay up to 25% of the amount of their PPP loan for rent, utilities, and other, you know, expenses like that. So, you know, that was the first thing I did with the commercial tenants when they came to us and said they had to be closed, they couldn't pay the rent. I said, here's your resources, go apply for a PPP loan. And I was referring, you know, First Republic Bank to them. And, you know, a lot of the problems that people had in the beginning was that everybody was working with the big banks, and the big banks were treating everybody like they didn't matter because that's their business model. And, you know, they were ushering, you know, Shake Shack and, you know, the big time businesses to the front of the line because that's the only people they care about. And it was difficult. A lot of people were giving me, I was hearing a lot of sob stories about how they just couldn't get anything out of their bank. And I did well. I got one from First Republic to help out and make sure that I had enough cash on hand to have no problem making payroll. And it was easy. They were fantastic. So, you know, the PPP loans are for your tenant to be able to pay you some rent, but I mean, it's only going to be good for a couple of months worth of rent. And then you're going to have to make some sort of a deal with them. And if they can't be open at all, they can't make any money, and you're kind of in trouble. So
back to the pound sand program. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It was great seeing you, and I'll see you next week. Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and for your thoughtful questions and a good conversation. I always enjoy it. Take care, everybody. Have a good rest of your week. Stay healthy. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.